All right. Happy Monday, everybody. And the opening of the week is back. How are y'all doing? 5d3 bishop c5 variation. No. The first thing we have to do is figure out the name of this opening. All right, so let me put the position up here. Maybe you guys can help me figure this out. No, it doesn't start with the c pawn. The Sicilian is very popular, but I was about to do like an A quality, top tier Sicilian defense for the week, this week. And then I thought, people always pick the Sicilian. It's always, so popular. But e4, e5, right? The opening the kids play, and they don't really know what they're doing. They play these like lame versions of the Italian game. And then we tell them like, okay, time to move on. But e4, e5 is an important opening. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at a variation of the Ruy Lopez. Okay, so it starts like this. I feel like players in the 1200 to 2000 range, right? They always want to look at something more interesting than the Petrov or the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game. And it's true. I tell them to like move on from the baby version of the Italian game. But, oh, got it wrong. Sorry, that's the Berlin defense. Anyway, we'll see if I can find my way to this opening. Okay, knight f6 here. This is what we want. All right, white castles. I think I'm getting here. b5, bishop b3, bishop c5. I think this is what I'm looking for. I think this is the position with bishop c5 I was looking for. Oh, Arkhangelsk. Okay. That's the first thing we needed. Uh-oh, I've got two different answers. Now what do I... Now what do I do? I was just typing in the Arkhangelsk, and now you're telling me it's actually the Molar? It's your opening. Then you should know what it's called. Oh, man. All right. Let me go over here and search. The Molar defense is without the move b5. Bishop b5, a6, bishop 4, knight 6, castles b5, bishop b3. Oh, the Arkhangelsk. Okay, the main Arkhangelsk, according to Chessable, it's my first time on their website, is bishop to b7. But the modern Arkhangelsk is bishop to c5. There, I just learned something finally from Chessable, which I will forget by the end of the week. Anyway, bishop c5. That's what we're doing. Okay, we can also call it the Archangel. Modern Arkhangelsk. All right. Okay, so I'm not the only one who wasn't totally sure what to call this. There has been some confusion here in our brilliant chat about it. The modern Arkhangelsk is what we're going to call it for the moment. All right. Lee Chess calls it Neo. Others call it Modern. All right. So this is the opening that we're going to learn this week. And the way we learn a new opening is by trying it out, right? A good dose of practice. By looking at some grandmaster games in the opening, and also by looking at the moves and like asking ourselves what's logical, what the moves are trying to do and what's logical to do against them, both for white and from black. And we're going to learn this opening from both perspectives this week. So yes, it's a Ruy Lopez week. All right, let's go back to the beginning and make sure you guys all know the fundamental point of the Ruy Lopez. Anybody want to tell me the fundamental point of the Ruy Lopez? What is the idea behind white's moves so far? What can you tell about what white's going to do with their other with their other pieces or in the next moves, what the follow-up might be. Controlling the center is very vague, Super Baguette. There are very few openings that do not aim to control the center, right? So more specifically, you know, several people are pointing out the e5 square. White is showing a particular interest in that square right now. Okay. In terms of White's priorities so far, they have both developed with every single move and tried to control the center with every single move. So you can't yet say for sure whether the person playing White is valuing development more or central control more or some kind of positional advantage they're trying to achieve. You don't yet really know. So far, the White moves are basically completely unimpeachable. Any move that doesn't hang material, that develops, and that develops in a way that fights for central control is basically an unimpeachable move in the opening. And if there's another move that you could play as well, it's an alternative, but it's not better than it. There's no way you know that these moves are bad moves that White's played so far. Okay, so specifically so far, White seems to be putting some pressure on this e5 square. And I would say the idea there is that while developing, White is hoping to use the threat against e5 to get some kind of concession out of Black. Try to force Black into some move that might not be Black's favorite ideal move. Okay, so for example, Kostya's comment that Grandmaster Kachaishvili told him the point of the Ruy Lopez is to provoke a queenside weakness with a6, b5. Right? That's one example of the kind of concession Black could make in order to defend the e5 pawn, right? In this position, Black could play a6, bishop a4, b5 to relieve the pressure against the knight and safeguard the e5 pawn. That would be a concession. Although Kachaishvili is a strong grandmaster who's beaten me several times, you know, at this point in the game, you couldn't say the point of bishop b5 is to make Black play a6, b5. That's a little bit of a stretch. Black has a range of options here that they could use. They're under pressure on e5, and White is hoping that each of those options is some kind of small concession. If instead of this, you played a developing move like knight c3 for White, you're developing quickly and controlling the center, but since you're not creating any specific threat or pressure on Black's position, Black should have a fairly free hand to play whatever development they prefer in this position here, right? No, I welcome interaction from the chat, absolutely. I'm just giving my response to it. So in this position, for example, you know, Black, according to their taste, could play bishop c5, bishop b4, knight to f6, pawn to d6, pawn to g6, to play bishop g7, right? Black has a certain freedom to play, within reason, to play kind of any logical developing move they want to. Now, that may or may not be the very best move at their disposal. Like, among those 5 or 6 moves I mentioned, there's probably some that are a tiny bit better than others. But to some extent, they seem to have sort of free latitude to do mostly what they want here, right? Yeah, Cartier, I saw that. I saw it named Columbus Variation when I was loading up some games in the database, and I thought, I've never heard of the Columbus defense of the Ruy Lopez. There must be some better known name for this opening. So, okay. So bishop b5, putting pressure here. Now, you could list all kinds of different defenses for Black, right? One would be d6, defending this. That would be potentially a concession because it blocks this bishop in. It also allows White to quickly play d4, threatening d5 and d takes e5 again, while playing a move that is developing and threatening the center. So it's looking to force even more concessions out of Black. Another option would be you could bolster these two squares with knight e7. So here the idea is, you know, well, White's pressure from the bishop is completely gone, right? Because the knight can just be replaced by another knight, which equally controls these squares. But now the concession from Black is that they're going to have to maybe lose some time or have some struggle to figure out how to develop this bishop here that's been blocked in as well, right? Since they played e5 in order to move the piece. All right. Other possible moves here from black that might be considered a concession. Well, we've already mentioned that, a6 followed by b5 to break the bishop's action on this diagonal could be considered a concession of some weaknesses on the queen side. That'll come up in the variations we're looking at today. What else could black do? Knight f6, the Berlin defense. Yeah, with this move, it doesn't really protect e5. It just counterattacks e4. And I think the most common response from white is to castle. Because now white's thinking, if pawns get traded on the e file, perhaps the white rook will be well placed to take advantage of that situation. And here black is still left with the decision around, how do we defend e5? Do we dare to take on e4? They do, but, that's another chapter. Okay, but just to introduce you to the kind of thinking that's present from the very outset with the Ruy-Lopez. Okay, so in this case, black's playing a6, bishop a4, knight f6. Justification from black's perspective is that if white takes, you might say black lost a tempo with a6, but on the recapture here, black's able to play a move that is necessary for the development, right? You need to move at least one pawn to let your bishops out. So actually, black hasn't lost a development tempo with a6 at the moment. If you count how many moves it would take for the rooks to see each other at this point, it's exactly the same for white or black. You'll see an extra white knight out, but this bishop is going to need a pawn move to get out, and the black bishops don't. So the development is still completely equal. Well, the development is still 1/2 tempo lead for white as it was on move 1. So black hasn't lost any tempi. And the pawn is tactically defended by the moves queen g5 or queen d4, each of which attack the knight while attacking one of white's undefended pawns. And that is a very, very simple example of the ebb and flow of tactical energy in chess. White has just burned their tactical energy, this bishop that can take out the knight, the poorly defended pawn on e5. But when you go and capture something of the opponent's, you yourself are temporarily exposed, right? You're not going to have this pawn attacked by 5 pieces when you go take it. When you take it, you're leaving a new piece of your own undefended usually when you capture an opponent's piece. And so black can take advantage of that with a quick counterattack. And this doesn't really lead to anything for white. So that's part of black's idea. But if white just retreats, black still has the knight and king to worry about as far as defending the e5 pawn. But black's point is that having played these two moves, black can always play b5 as necessary to stop that threat. That's the concession that black has in mind here for dealing with the e5 pawn. So now black plays knight f6. That's a fairly simple move. Black's hoping to castle kingside. Black's hoping to develop all the pieces to good squares. And black's hoping that in some cases the threat against the e4 pawn will help them. Okay. And white castles. And you could tell from this opening of white's bringing all these pieces out that castling kingside was very likely since it was so available. And here castling is used as a way of not having to spend a move defending this pawn with something like d3 or knight c3. White has greater ambitions. And their greater ambition, which you can see a little bit here when they pass up d3 and knight c3, is that white wants to play d4 at some point. That's one of the big ideas of the Ruy-Lopez for white, is that if you put enough pressure on e5 to put black maybe in a slightly defensive stance, you might have time as white to play the move c3, a not developing move, in order to build up a bigger center with d4 and gain a central advantage. So white looks to leave this pawn hanging with the idea that rook to e1 will, win back a pawn and hopefully in a favorable way for white if black does go for this. So now with the king castled, white is starting to get ready to play takes, knight takes. We'll illustrate that by playing rook b8 for black. Now in this position, can black win back the pawn on e5? Let's see. Queen d4, like we said before. Knight f3, queen here. Oh, it's not check anymore. So that's no good. Alternatively, black could try and take this with the knight that was in position here, right? And now, white's got either rook e1 or queen e2, and one of these moves is likely to be bad for black. Try rook e1 first. If the knight retreats somewhere, then there's a famous trap you guys know, most of you. A fancy move that looks interesting to me is this. And I suspect white can actually sack this f2 pawn and come out ahead, although there's also the move queen f3. But what if we played knight f3, hitting the queen, queen check, king here, and the knight's hanging now? I don't see many moves other than f5 to play for black, and then I play d3 for white, and yeah. You got me on f2, but I think with an extra piece, white will be totally okay with this. There's a weird not threat of bishop e3 trapping the queen that might also come into play at some point here. But probably this soundly wins a piece for white. So that tells us that in this position after white castles, there is a threat again on e5. And so black is going to now play this b5 move. And it's very clear what the point of that move was. It's to stop bishop takes c6. Now black develops the bishop to a pretty ideal diagonal, if I may say so. And I think white would agree, having placed their bishop on this diagonal. There's no pawn on e3. And so the bishop has pretty good chance at having a fairly long diagonal with a home to tuck itself in. So it doesn't get attacked or traded off. And that's probably the most active square the bishop can hope for in this variation here. So this move, I think, provides a very clear challenge to white, that black wants to have the bishop on a very active square and castle without making like a d6 concession that locks the bishop inside. So here I imagine there are a number of possible moves for white. And we can start thinking for ourselves about what can happen here. And then we can also look at some Grandmaster games in this opening. So why don't you all ask yourselves what is logical for white to do against black's response to the Ruy Lopez at this point? Black has perhaps conceded some weakness to this pawn structure here. Black has aimed to get this bishop on a very good diagonal and stay active. And black's development is more or less keeping pace, right? Every pawn move that didn't develop a piece, white moved the bishop again in response. If we count how many moves for the rooks to see each other, black actually potentially with this move could come out ahead. 1, 2, 3 moves for black, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 moves for white. So potentially, black could be ahead on development at this point. Half a tempo. Stolen white's half tempo that white started the game with as a white prerogative. So far, black's center looks solid. Their development is going quickly. And the only major concession seems to be this a6, b5 thing. And the biggest dream that they have is this bishop being on this diagonal. So what's logical for white in response to this? Okay, a few suggestions of the move c3. And I think, well, nobody said the idea behind it. Are you guys dojoers or random chess players? Okay, c3 to prepare d4, says Super Baguette. Okay, that makes sense. And why are we preparing d4? May seem obvious to you, but it's useful for us to like speak our ideas out so that we understand what's at stake with every move we play. c3 and d4 will be to establish a central advantage for white and also to negate the main thing black was trying to get for themselves in this opening, right? The main thing black was hoping would be special about their opening here was that this bishop was going to be great on this diagonal. But if white plays d4, maybe it won't be, right? So we see where the black bishop is. We hope to spoil that positioning and even to win a tempo when we play d4 hitting the bishop. A tempo which will only make up for the c3, our next extravagance as white, right? c3 is yet another extravagance, blocking this piece in when our development is already just pathetic, honestly. Welcome, Random. We're happy to have you. Do not worry, I did not disparage. Actually, it sort of sounded like I did, but, you know, not in any kind of unkind way. I'm just trying to poke everybody into thinking. All right. So c3 is an option. You guys have any other ideas for white, or is it just like c3 is so obvious that's the only move? Is nobody interested in developing, or what else could you do in chess? And in the opening phase, you can develop, you can try and build a big center. c3, d4 is taking a big center. Cartier Tonk is suggesting some extra moves because he comes into this knowing something. But if you're going to suggest moves, Cartier, and you already even know them, at least suggest the idea along with. Is h3 too passive? I don't like black going knight g4. h3 is certainly passive. If it's played only to stop black from playing knight g4, then I would say you're losing the opening battle, aren't you, as white? So I'd love to hear an idea for white, right? If you want to suggest the h3 move for white here, tell me why. What's the idea? h3 to play g4? a4 because it's spicy? Tell me more. What's the point of a4? What's the point of h3? What do you guys want to do? So there are a couple people giving an idea. They're saying d3 defends the pawn, and then we can just develop our pieces with bishop g5 and knight b to d2. Okay? So an alternative to c3, d4 is to just play d3, safeguard your center, and then develop your pieces. There we go. That's an idea. Another idea is d3, bishop e3, continuing development and simply challenging the piece that black has spent effort putting onto a good square. Let me take this idea d3 further. d3, let's castle for black, just to give black a logical move. I'm not saying it's the best or worst move. Bishop e3. Let's talk about what might be nice about this concept from Nordovik. If black trades on e3, it's going to develop our rook. We'll have the only open file on the board. If black retreats, because their bishop's attacked, then we're going to have won a tempo. So we're going to start getting ahead on development. If black uses this structure here to put their bishop on b7, we are providing a rock. And the bishop on b7 is going to need some work to be well placed in that position that Nordovik's creating, right? So if the game went here, 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 some position like this, you would say, huh, looks like white's game is kind of nicely laid out. Right? Does that make sense? That like Nordovik's idea is very, very sensible. This kind of a scenario here at first look seems very pleasant for white. Okay, so that's the d3 idea. So we've got c3, d4, we've got a d3 idea. Let's see what other ideas we've got in chat here. Okay, Linear Stork says just play knight c3 to develop your pieces. And I think Linear Stork's also thinking of, yeah, idea to centralize the knight. So Linear Store is saying here's maybe a slightly weak square. He's got the idea of playing knight c3, defending his pawn, and then maybe going forward into a weak square of black's as a follow-up. That makes sense. And Kostya is saying at the end of that Nordovik idea, for white, he likes the idea of a3 so that black can't trap his bishop. And then he wants to go queen e1, knight to h4, I think. And then knight f5 with a nice attack. And honestly, the first move I looked at in this position was knight h4. If black wanted to play knight f5 while I'm just playing knight f5 quickly, I would let black do that probably. But the problem is knight takes e4 seems to win a pawn, as far as I can tell. So that's why Kostya is coming up with this like slower plan. And now you guys see a whole middle game set up for white. Queen e1, queen can also transfer to g3 at some point. Knight h4, knight f5, the rook gets in to play. That's like a whole layout for the game that looks quite nice, right? Okay. So we've gotten very deep into the idea of d3, but that's that's what I want you guys to have in mind when you tell me like a4 in this position here. I want you to tell me like, here's how the game could develop from a4, you know, because that was a very, very good concept that was there with d3 as well. Okay. What other ideas we have? Nobody has yet given a reason for a4. Interesting. And now somebody says queen e2 is nice, but again, I need to know more to be convinced. You know, somebody told me a4 was spicy, and now you're telling me queen e2 is nice, but neither of those things are very convincing to me. Yeah, bishop f7 check is bad here. That's not enough for the piece. d3, knight d4 is suggested. Well, white could either trade to keep this bishop, or white could just take the pawn on e5. Okay, a4, undermining these pawns and saying that they're overextended. Paul's played the c3, d4 idea before as well. Okay, that's a start, Steve. All right, and Cartier is helping all you a4 people out with this. One of the major points of a4 is that it's developing a rook. That's huge. That's huge development, right? And you're putting some pressure on the structure, yes, but you're doing it while developing. So that's very nice. That makes a4. That's one of the reasons why you see a4 in almost every single Ruy Lopez. Like, White'll just like throw it in there, because generally speaking, your opponent has to like respond to the threat on b5, and then your rook has just gotten into the game. It's just exerting influence forever at that point. And a4 may also induce a concession, Julio says, like something like rook b8 or b4, right? So if your opponent plays a move like rook b8 or b4, your bishop's now got a retreat square. Your rook's got a bit more scope than before, even though it didn't get an open file. And your opponent's response was just to push this pawn again. Now you've got an outpost here for this knight, maybe. So you've got some different options. If black plays rook b8, you can make a pawn trade that leaves you with the open file and them with the sort of like couple squares of scope, but nothing like your a file. So everything there would look like some kind of a concession, right? Yeah, rook e1, knight g4 doesn't look super exciting for white here. So yeah, d3, bishop e3 is fine. Queen e2 would be fine. I'd just like to know what queen e2 is aiming to do in the future, right? Is queen e2 aiming to play c3, d4, or d3, or a4? It's certainly looking like probably the best square on the board for the queen. So it could just be a flexible move that defends your pawn, and you can later look towards either a maneuvering plan with d3, a queenside plan with a4, a center plan with c3. But taking the queen off d1, I guess, makes c3, d4 less likely to work out. Yeah, it is baguette. Perhaps the least concessionary move from black against a4 would be a move like bishop b7. Developing a piece, defending the rook, saying, hey, if you open the a file, I'm going to contest you. I'm not just going to give you the file to your rook. That might be the least concession-y move, right? There, white has to still do something to prove that they're creating any kind of pressure or concession out of black, for sure. Now, it's still white controls this tension, so it's still white's, played a good move and improved their rook, but this might be a very good defense to that. Okay. When I say bishop b7 is good, I don't mean in the sense of like refuting or denigrating what white was trying to do, but it does look like a move that provides very little concession from black. Okay, Flachspieler says, yeah, if we go queen e2, we could play with rook d1 when we go c3 and d4. And that would just be a different setup than what you normally see in the Rui, right? You'll normally see the rook on e1 defending this pawn and the queen on d1 supporting this. Now, there are some lines in the main line of the Rui Lopez, some side lines where white plays queen e2 instead of rook e1 and then probably plays c3, rook d1. And I think Nigel Short used to play that, and it's probably interesting. Maybe that could be our opening of the week another time. Or we could try it against this modern Arkhangelsk and see if it's a good plan here. Bishop g4 is a move here, Flachspieler. I wouldn't call it a danger. The pin is annoying. The pin's not... Okay. The pin's annoying to you. I can't tell you how you feel. The pin might be a good move. The pin might be a good move. All right. So here are the ideas we have for white so far, everybody, okay? We've got d3, bishop e3, counteracting the bishop on c5, and prioritizing some development for white at the moment. Simple. Not trying to like take over the whole game. Just keep the game going. It probably doesn't promise like a fast pace opening, but it does ask black some tricky positional questions and might lead to a small advantage for white in the middle game, in probably maneuvering middle game. Then we've got the idea of c3, d4. This hopes to refute black and will probably lead to both players fighting for control of d4 pretty fiercely, would be my guess. White's pawn on d4 won't really be like hopping at the opportunity to push ahead to d5 or take on e5 because that'll make black's bishop like great again. So you may have a long standoff in the c3, d4 lines where both players are fighting over control of that d4 square. I could imagine that could be pretty tense. Just guessing what that might look like. And then we've got a4, increasing the scope of the rook, trying to cause some little concession from black on the queen side. And after we play a4, we could then go with c3 or d3 or queen e2, etc., one of our other plans. So queen e2 is another idea we have, looking to maybe play c3, rook d1, d4, or maybe play queen e2, a4, or maybe play queen e2 and then switch to d3 and just calm maneuvering. Queen e2 is generally a pretty flexible move here, but it's also a move that doesn't put super fast pressure on black, I guess, since like d4 is definitely not coming quickly if it comes. So I would say queen e2 is going to be a little bit like d3 in the sense that black's got a bit of time before any threats or serious pressure come in. And I'm going to repeat something that Kostya is explaining in chat just for anybody who watches this on YouTube about the discussion of a bishop on g4, maybe in these queen e2 lines. So queen e2, castles, c3, d6, rook d1, right? It was in this position that people were saying, well, bishop g4 might be like a danger. How can we play d4 now? How can we deal with this thing here? A very important thing that Kostya points out is if there's a pawn on c3, there's no knight d4 coming, and therefore white's not like in danger. This could restrict white from doing what they want to, but black doesn't have like a follow-up coming next that hurts white, right? You could just play d3 for white and black's not attacking you or anything like that. But furthermore, there's a very important point that if you have not yet played d4, you can play h3. And you're asking the question of this bishop. If it trades off, black concedes a very nice bishop pair for white, and white has a stable advantage. If black retreats this way, then bishop g4 didn't hurt you, and you should be glad that you didn't spend a move playing h3 to prevent it, since you could have actually won time with them going back and forth. If the bishop retreats this way, now what white does is they do not play d4, because white is not in position to win the fight over the d4 square here. Not really. What you want to do now is just put the pawn on d3 over protecting e4. This bishop has now gotten stuck in a very small area, right? And the pawns at d3, e4, and h3 restrict it quite nicely and keep that bishop contained. And white can maneuver with their pieces and bring this knight over to the king side, and often even play with g4 to restrict that bishop more. Certainly put the knight on g3. And that's a plan which often gives white a nice middle game. And that often shows the bishop on h5 not to be so amazing. Okay? So. The only move we haven't really discussed much here, but which is a real move, I believe, I mean, at least it's a move I would look at during a game, is knight takes e5. And what is this move looking to do? Well, I mean, we can explain the goal of this move. White's saying, like, black tried for this very aggressive bishop placement, which is exposed to the d4 move. Right? Black didn't play d6 early on to defend this pawn because they were hoping to get the bishop out. And now, even though black's development is relatively good, white's going to take advantage of the position of the bishop to just take out black's center, right? We're going to spare ourselves this c3 tempo, right? Our idea is to get something like this. And white can actually develop relatively quickly from this position anyway. And, have played this d4 move tactically instead of c3-ally. And I imagine black's got one or two different responses to this. But in my experience, the center fork trick is a very, very efficient way of gaining a central advantage without losing time or making concessions. So actually, when I first see this position, and I guess black probably doesn't have like a ton of different moves they can play after knight e5, because black doesn't want white to take on f7, black doesn't want white to take here. Probably black doesn't have a million choices of what to do in response to this. In my experience, this is a very efficient way to take over the center. So this needs to be investigated as well. Okay, so how many different candidate moves do we have for white here? c3, d3, a4, queen e2, knight e5. 5 big candidate moves, right? That all make sense for white here. Okay. Cool. So 5 big moves to look at. All these moves, I think, bear trying out. All of these moves, somebody in chat or myself has provided a reasonable like justification for, something that makes it plausible. Now, some of these moves might not work, right? Like you might try out, knight e5 would be like the most likely to fail because it's like the most tactical and sharp. You might try this out and it turns out there's some variation for black that deals with this. But it's still worth trying and figuring out why it does or doesn't work and then continuing on. Now, let's say knight e5 doesn't work here for some reason. I'm going to take an aside to tell you for a minute about my approach to learning chess and studying openings. Let's say for some reason knight e5 doesn't work here. If you did not think about all these moves the way we have just done, if instead you were just like, oh, David said we're going to learn this opening, you could have skipped the last 40 minutes of this video, right? You could have just started right here. This was the position, right? You could have just thrown this into a computer or thrown it into a database. The computer or database, if knight e5 is bad, won't even list it, right? It'll be like the 5th or 7th or 8th choice for white, right? So you'll never even look at this move or think about it. Thank you. So you'll never even look at this move or think about this move, and you won't question why it does or doesn't work, okay? It'll be completely not even a consideration for you. If knight e5 fails for some reason, knight e5 is a very typical move in e4, e5 openings. You're missing a chance to help yourself calibrate for when knight e5 does or doesn't work. You're also learning to sleepwalk through positions like this without even noticing that knight e5 was possible. So if you're playing double king pawns with your opponents with white or with black, at some point you'll allow your opponent a favorable knight takes e5 in one of your games, or from the white side, a favorable knight takes e4. And the reason you'll allow it is because you've been sleepwalking through positions like this, not checking the move all the time, not aware of the move, right? You're not thinking about it. You think, oh, it only exists in that one, trap for kids, right? Everything you know about knight takes e4 will be like, oh, there's one position with one thing that's the center fork trick. This is a trap, it's bad for white, and white shouldn't allow it. Now, by the way, that's a terrible oversimplification of this position here as well. White has multiple ways to play this position. So even the small amount of knowledge you have, if you face somebody who plays this as white, you'll play knight takes e4, they'll play some variation, you'll be ill-prepared, you'll just think like, oh, this is bad, you won't understand why it might be bad, and you'll go on to lose the game against this center fork trick, and then say like, my opponent was such an idiot. He played like a trap like that 6-year-old kids want to fall into. And then, I can't believe I blew the game and didn't win. Well, guess what? You're not winning at this point, black. The position's like maybe equalized. Hooray. But you had no idea. You didn't even know what knight takes e4 did. You didn't know if it equalized or won or if this was even the right position for it. Okay? Got it, Jon Snow? So, you don't want to sleepwalk past all these moves. If you're playing, if knight e5 doesn't work here, you need to consider it. You need to try it out, find out why it doesn't work, and then move on. And now you'll have one extra reference point for when does knight e5 work or not work in chess. It's a very, very important move to think about. It comes up in anti-Sicilians. It comes up in all kinds of openings. I've seen it. Okay? So, that is my advertisement for why you shouldn't have skipped the last 40 minutes of this video and why we should consider a move like knight e5 and think about what moves we might or might not play here as white or black for ourselves before we jump straight into databases or computer lines, right? Like I could put this position here and just turn on the chess.com computer. The feeblest live chess version of it. And, maybe knight takes e5 appears, maybe it doesn't. Right now it's showing us the third choice of the computer. Okay, so that would make me think about knight takes e5. Oh, now it dropped off and the computer's not even listing it at a depth of 20. So depending how strong the computer is or how fast it thinks, it may or may not even show you the move, right? So you could pass right through without even thinking about those moves. We don't know if it works yet or not, 11 Jin. That's for us to learn, right? Right? That's for us to learn and figure out here. Okay, so we've got 5 moves to explore this week, folks. Maybe even a 6th move, right? We've got knight c3 as a possible move, which was originally suggested by Linear Stork, who's backing off from it, but it's also kind of an unimpeachable move. If a move that doesn't exert an immediate pressure on black, it's definitely something we can investigate. So you guys should try out these moves. You guys should try out these moves in some practice blitz games with other dojoers, right? Try out knight takes e5. Try out d3. Try out c3. Try out a4. Try out queen e2. Try out a4. Man, now I don't even want to study GM games. I just want to try some of this stuff out. Now I just want to try it out. Anybody want to play chess with me? I have a warning here that I've been disconnected from live chess, so I don't know if I'll be able to. But my dream is to just start playing, honestly. I just want to try all of this out. Perhaps not against Sombrero, who already knows all of it. All right, let me try refreshing live chess after saving my PGN. Yeah, that did delete my PGN as expected. Oh wait, it's taking longer than usual to connect, so it's not even actually reconnecting. I may not be able to practice if that's the case. Anybody else have live chess working or not for them right now? Home. Chess.com is up. Let's try going to play instead of to live chess. Let's see if play is working. Can I make an analysis board in this new play thing? It doesn't seem to offer an analysis board as an option here. Interesting. I see I'm getting a challenge from Falk, so I'm looking forward to playing with Falk. All right, let's start playing. Boom, here we are. Time to learn this opening. I was going to show you guys some GM games and then practice the opening later in the week, but I'm just too excited to try out some of these ideas and see what seems to work or not. Oh, Knight f6, attacking the pawn. Then when he castles, b5, bishop c5. That's the ambition, to get the bishop out there. See what happens. You guys think he's just going to crash my pawn on e5 right away and I'm going to have to calculate? Marshall is not the opening of the week, Saints. Okay, what do I do? I wanted to be the one playing knight e5. How did I get black? How did I get black here? Okay. Knight e5, d4, bishop d6, pawn takes, bishop takes, f4. Bishop d6, e5. Bishop c5, check, king h1. Knight e4, bishop d5 resigns. Looks like I can't really save the bishop there. Okay. I'm afraid chess.com is going to like disconnect me in a second here. You know what I mean? Like abandon, forfeit me for thinking about my moves. So I got to make at least one. If I retreat, pawn takes knight, knight e4, he comes to d5 again. Okay, try this. Falk's calculating on my time, probably. What a jerk, huh? What a jerk. All right, so the queen's got to pick a square. I'm obviously looking to sack my knight and play c4. Sorry, I'm torn between wanting to explain to you guys and wanting to figure out something. I can't really explain it to you if I haven't figured it out yet. So let's go with figuring it out. Sombrero, if you know what's going on, you can just explain to chat. I won't read the explanations. I'll just play. I'm just fighting for anything I can get here as black. If white gets 1 or 2 moves of development, my position will just be bad. So it's got to be tactics for me here. Okay. I think I found a line, folks. If white plays queen c3, I can go c4, pawn takes knight, knight takes e4. And then the queen moves somewhere like e3 or d3 or whatever. And in that position, I'll just play d5 defending the knight. And by playing d5, I don't trade for the pawn on e5. So that still blocks some of the diagonals of their unopposed dark squared bishop. And eventually I pick up this bishop with the c4 pawn. And position looks playable, not lost. Position looks not lost for me. Yeah. And 2 losing moves for white are queen e3 or queen f2. Well, I don't know about losing, but queen e3, queen f2, I could play knight g4, hit the queen, and then c4. Okay, this move makes sense. Now if I go c4, pawn takes knight e4, he's got queen f4, which is no bueno. And I'm probably playing c4 here, but I could also play knight c4 maybe. It's not very desirable. I don't want the queen trading on d8. I don't want my king in the center here, actually. I could play pawn takes pawn, queen takes, king takes, bishop g5. I just don't like that. Maybe even bishop h6 I wouldn't like for black. So. Okay, now I can take the pawn here, I think. So I'm down a piece still. When I get this piece here, which I'm planning to, material will be about equal. Got to take it. No doubt. Now bishop e6 or bishop b7. Who cares about my c-pawn? I want this long diagonal. I want a really, really active bishop, right? When we go opposite colored bishops facing off in the middle game, you want yours to just be killer. Can I just castle? Yes. But he'll play bishop g5. That's the real threat, more than this. What do I do if he goes bishop g5? Uh-oh. I didn't see what to do against bishop g5. So I played a move to try and create a response to bishop g5. I don't want to lose the fight over e4, d5. I'm the one with the light squared bishop. If I lose the fight over e4, d5, I assume I'm busted. I'm not looking to like retreat and let white put a knight on d5 against me. Man, I can't get what I need. I can't get what I need. This isn't just satisfaction. What I need is this e4 square. Oh, Lord. Actually, wait. Here's maybe a genius idea. If he goes bishop g5, he doesn't have the rook on f1 anymore, right? So I go here. Haha. Boom. I thought for 1 second about gf to you know, converge everybody on g2, but I need a healthy structure. I need a healthy structure here because unless I can break e4, I'm never converging on anything. And playing g takes f6 hurts my chances to fight for e4. All right, queen there. I don't know what that's about. It's probably just time to castle here, right? Should I throw my h-pawn in his face? h5, h4? What do you think? It's possible, right? Let's just do something a little different. Oh, really? Didn't I tell you I wanted to do this? Wasn't that really, like, telegraphed, televised, hyper obvious? Let's do this. Get there, get there, get there. Tricky. Tricky situation. shoot. The thing I wanted to do does not entirely work. All right, I'm just going to play a simple move and just get castled. If I'd played queen f2 last move, he had queen e2. And I wanted to play queen takes rook in that position, and if knight takes rook e4 and I win, but he would just take back on e2 with his queen, so it just wouldn't work. All right. Two minutes, huh? Okay, I've got a minute to think. This is not the move I was looking at the whole time. I spent the whole time looking at queen b6 and queen c6. You know, like here, bishop c8, queen g5 or h4, f5, and now knight d5. This is truly a mess, right? This is kind of like something I spent a long time looking at, and queen c6 is kind of similar. It's like queen c6, rook e1, overprotecting this against an exchange sack at some point. Bishop c8, queen here, f5, and still knight d5, right? Oh, but now there's just rook d5 winning. Ah, I missed that. I missed that. Yeah, queen h6 was a possible move too, harder. I looked at it here as well. Queen h6, looking at e3 and d2, and possibly bishop c8, f5 as well. But finally, I played a very, very simple technical move here. It hits the queen, and the queen's defending this. So white has to trade queens, basically. Rook f5, g6 should probably lose for white. I didn't really calculate it much. Obviously, it doesn't threaten to take the rook right away. It's just, I'm not sure what white's doing, having the rook hit here, given that black can always take on e4, right? So I didn't even really look at it. I think this is basically forced, right? And now the idea is there's this pressure on e4, but the big threat from black is rook to d2, and that move is hard to answer, right? It's very hard for white to set up a rook to defend the second rank here. At least I didn't see how to do it. So for example, for white, I looked at here, rook here, rook here, rook here, takes. Takes. Oh my god. And did I miss a shot here with bishop e4? No, rook e4. Okay. Oh, the knight's covering the back rank mate. Yeah. So anyway, so I would just go here, here, check, here, and here. Obviously, my pawn structure is the trashiest, but I've got at least one extra pawn, depending how you want to count my pawns, and I've got bishop versus knight. So this was something that I was potentially happy about. King G1 suggests Falk. Oh. Yeah, I don't want anything to do with that move. Good move. Shoot. That's a much better defense. Now I don't have that much. I probably just have to take this pawn. That's a great defensive idea, right? He wants to check here and come here. Right? Black's a little bit better, but I probably just have to retreat back to here, right? So, yeah, that's a good one. Oh, that's a great defense. So I would have had to just probably take the pawn. And then white can go to the rook and pawn ending with fair chances of holding, although I also have some chance of winning. Who knows? Okay. Craziness. This was a very, very intense phase in the game where we're fighting over this square here. In this position here, I think it just ended up sort of working out for me, although not like I'm winning or anything, just like I'm able to survive. You know, in this position, I could have just played h6 to stop bishop g5. And I know, folks, I rarely play these moves, right? But here we're fighting this critical fight for these squares, and white's threat is bishop g5. And then, you know, white could trade it, or white could just leave the trade hanging over me. And if I ever stop pressuring e4, white just plays knight d5, and my position's worse. Cartier, you think h6 was an exclam here? Just to keep that knight and keep that pressure? Okay, I tried to be a genius and like find a way to keep the pressure while allowing that trade. Yeah, obviously I was trying to explore something interesting here with h5, h4, and all this. So close to winning for black. Very, very interesting. Castles here. Yeah, I don't know. Black's a bit better, so I mean, that's at least an opening success. All right. Why was queen f2, rook d2 not working? Ah, this line here instead of castling. Yeah, I wanted to play here, here, here. And flashy win, right? But after rook e2, if you take it, white takes with the queen and leaves the knight defending this. So now you're down to queen. Otherwise, I'm not sure what black's supposed to do after rook e2 attacks the queen. I looked at rook e4, bishop e4, and f5 here. f5, white has queen g6, check. And then rook takes queen. So, anyone else want to try out this opening with me? Anybody else want to play a game? Sure, Saints. Cartier can. Yeah, I'm sure. You can challenge D. Bruce on chess.com to a 5-minute unrated. Or you can tell me your chess.com name and I'll challenge you. The opening of the week, Max, is this. The new or modern or neo Arkhangelsk. Lil Wayne the Goat. All right, look at that. We got it. All right. Which plan should I try, folks? Let's start by poking. Let's start by poking. I did really want to take on e5, but now Falk did that against me, and now I want to see one of the other lines. Can I take on e5 now? That would count as a different line, right? Knight e5, knight e5, d4. Bishop retreats, takes, f4 should still work. Everything should still work more or less the same, but the bishop's harder to trap. Right? Isn't that logical? The bishop's harder to trap now. With c5, c4, because this pawn's not on b5. And because the bishop's got a2. Oh my goodness. Yes, yes! This makes sense. I don't care if I have white or black, Max. I'm trying to learn this opening from both sides. Harder Boy seems to love the word boy. This does feel a little bit like a potential refutation of that b4 move, huh? That seems to be a big concession there. I wonder how the knight e5 tactic affects black's 3 choices in response to a4, right? We mentioned that here black could play maybe rook b8, maybe b4, or maybe bishop b7. But all 3 of those moves, before playing them, black has to calculate knight e5. Remember the point I made earlier, folks, about how like even if knight e5 doesn't work in this position, and it's not mentioned by like a computer or a database or whatever, you need to know why it does or doesn't work so that you'll be able to apply that knowledge to other positions. Do you guys remember that point? And that other position is just this far away, right? a4. Every move for black, here b4, bishop b7, rook b8, you have to evaluate it against what if white plays knight e5 in response. You have to be familiar with the ideas, otherwise you can't make any decisions. All right, munch it. All right, so now I'm going to retreat my queen somewhere. Most logical is d3 because it doesn't block this bishop in. Other options are like e3, c4. You asking me teal sour oatmeal? Yeah. Didn't we mention this just a couple days ago? That I've played there for the Quebec Invitational Championships. That's how I met Lafong. Does queen c4 win the game? Queen d7. And knight e5. Bishop f7 wins a pawn. I'm not mad about pawns. I mean, I'll take a pawn. But I already have like a bishop pair. Bishop pair is pretty good. How is it logical to set up these white pieces? Black's always going to have knight e5. The queen wants to go to the dark square. Does the bishop want to go here or just e3? How's this pawn supposed to stay defended? No, I don't know Virginie. It was 20 years ago that I went there. Oatmeal. This line for black is a gambit. Material's equal at the moment. I have not successfully made my opponent gambit anything just yet. All right, I'm going to develop this. I'm looking to play f4 pretty soon, folks. Let this not be a surprise. I'm looking to play f4 pretty soon. Fong's about the same age as me, guys. Okay. Nice maneuver from Lil Wayne. Knight bounces its way back over here and diffuses some of the pressure against the black king side. Very nice maneuver by black. So maybe I'm just going to put my rooks in the center now. Play it patiently. Lil Wayne, the positional genius. My opponent's playing some really, really dang good moves here. Yeah, my knight needs to go to e3. Cartier's exactly right. I was going to play it through c4, not f1. My queen needs f1, as you're about to see. The queen needs f1. This is the move I've been wanting to play the whole time. So I'm happy to see queen e5. Well, I wasn't like happy to see it. I was like, why queen e5? What's happening? Okay. I know the knight's supposed to go through there. Go figure. Go figure. The knight's going to have to find something else to do. This bishop pair is slow work, right, guys? Slow, slow work. Bishop pair inches its way into the game. But it's kind of hell to be under that kind of positional torture as black as well, right? I mean, black just gradually runs out of things to move. You weren't even playing with a mouse? Good Lord. Well, at least you were playing with the brain. That was some fantastic positional defense. The knight maneuvers over to the king side, fighting on the dark squares with the queen and your pawn structure to keep the dark square bishop of white that you can't block with the bishop. To keep it under control with your knights and pawns is very, very well played positionally. Very, very well played. Yeah, I mean, it did not feel like I was playing a 1300. It felt like you were a very strong chess player. All right, so looking at that opening, folks, I mean, despite the fact that Lil Wayne played this position throughout like a genius, my sense should be that this opening should not be okay for black, right? Something's like not good about this position for black. White's got the bishop pair. White's got the better space in the center. I mean, it's kind of like magic that he made a game out of this. I mean, at any point, I could content myself with a somewhat smaller advantage. Like, I could let him trade and take back like this, right? I could just start a knight maneuver here to e3 through f1 or c4 and keep like a small edge for white, probably. Maybe that's sort of more prudent to play some position like this. And, you know, white can attack these pawns at some point. White's got a bit more space. The knight can come to e3 at some point. And black's bishop is more restrained than white's. Maybe that would have been a simpler way to play it, rather than this like tucking of the bishop and letting him get active. Although I was able to like hold it together, so why not keep my bishop pair? I don't know. I don't know the theory of it either, Saints. We're just all investigating it. So my sense is like somehow this line with b4, this felt pretty suspect. The position we immediately get into feels really tough for black. Maybe there's some other responses here. I saw in chat Sombrero say something like this line is a gambit. So maybe he means it's Stafford gambit, like you just castle here and let white do this to you, maybe. This pawn here is stopping knight c3. So in the trade of like concessions, actually this a4 move hasn't developed the rook and the knight is still slow to get into the game. So white probably plays with like d3 to cover this. And then, I don't know, bishop g4, knight g4, h5 maybe. Who knows how this stuff work. Purple puppies. Good question. I'll answer that in a second. You always play the martial attack. Yeah, I mean, the martial attack was my main intention when I played the black side of the Rui a couple times long ago. Okay, so there's a question from Puppy Dogs why the knight would be good on e3 eventually. So here's an example of when the knight got to e3, right, Puppy? From here, the knight can't really be attacked by the black pieces, and the knight looks at some potential outposts on d5 and f5. In the game, the knight went from e3 to f5, and then you can see here it's protected. If black ever plays g6 to chase it, I can win a pawn on h6, so it's very hard to get rid of it, and it's pressuring this pawn here. Additionally, I mean, it's just covering a lot of squares, right? It's sort of in black's face. It supports bishop h4, so like if black ever goes for like a knight maneuver, like knight e7 or something, I have bishop h4. Basically, how I eventually won this game was Lil Wayne ran out of time to find moves for black to play because black had like less and less things they could move without losing something. The knight on f5 is worth the maximum a knight can be worth, pretty much. Put it that way. All right, got some more challenges coming in. Steve Nash, Max Mlinick. So we'll play a couple more games. Very few white players allow the marshal. Yeah, it's pretty rare. All right, let me try something else here that we haven't tried yet today. Let's try d3, bishop e3, the Nordovik. Actually, I'm really intrigued by queen e2 also. But let's just try the Nordovik. It's very clear and simple. We have like an exact layout for what to do every step of the way from here. So let's just try it and get a sense of how good it is. Queen e2 is like a... Queen e2 is a fancier move. To make queen e2 work, we have to have an idea of like in which positions. We have to have a sense of when does knight e5 work, when does d3 work, when does a4 work. And then we play queen e2 and see what they do and then like play off of it. So I need some basic knowledge before I get into anything as fancy as queen e2. What happens if I just go bishop e3? You know, do I like or not my position here? So black could retreat, black could trade. They could trade and immediately play d5, or they could trade and play like d6 and stuff like we did when we were first laying out the game. What does white play in the Ruy Lopez to avoid the marshal? They basically hold back the move c3, Vilhais, because the marshal is partly based on the move c3, slowing white's own development. So instead of playing c3, d4, they'll play either a4 or h3, which are two useful moves that they often play later, and then they can go for c3 and stuff like that after. All right, so the bishop retreats. Now the knight could go to c3 or d2. And we can also throw in the move a4 now, right? That makes sense, trying to develop the rook. It puts some weird questions on this a7 square. Like here, in theory, I could trade on b5, trade on a7, and then win the pawn on e5, right? So this is a little poke. A little poke. Just a little poke. I mean, black's got a million ways to prevent a takes b5 from winning a pawn, but it just shows that this move has some impact while trying to develop the rook, right? We're trying to improve the scope of the rook and develop it. So that's what a4 is about. And if black plays b4, then I know my knight wants to go to d2. And if black leaves the pawn on b5, then I probably know my knight wants to go to c3, right? So that's what we're looking at here. Oh, now I'm going to just win the pawn against this move, I think. Check this out, folks. That's the poke. That's the pressure. That's the little like threats that you use in this opening to force concessions out of the opponent. Now we'll trade. here, I think. I don't see a downside to doing that, really. I'm up a pawn. It develops my rook. The marshal has now received so much love that basically you can't even get it as black anymore. And then I grab this pawn, and white's position is up a pawn with 0 things wrong about it. I don't remember doing a hallowed knight thing with Johnson. All right, so d6, should the knight just come back to f3? Or should it head to c4? I think actually I might just want this knight on c4. But, okay. Yeah. Actually, do I want to play d3 f4 or f3 d4? Either way, the knight would be in the way on f3. All right, knight's coming back. Knight's coming back this way. Yeah, anti-marshals are very popular. Pleafers, it's something kind of like a milkshake, ice creamy kind of thing. What about Uncle Sam Cartier? You listen to it. Mm-hmm. Pretty good, right? I'm going to keep this long-range bishop here rather than trading it for the knight. Also, I wouldn't want the knight trading on b3 and then c takes b3, right? And then that pawn structure is sort of trash. That pawn structure is definitely trash. Okay. Develop this piece. Mm-hmm. Just develop the queen. I think the knight was trying to take e5 as its home. This move's very natural, fighting for control of d6 and e5 with the knight on c4. Now I just move my king to stop the knight e2 forks. All right, I'm just holding things solid here. Just chilling with my extra pawns. All right, let's play Max another game. Oh, sorry, let's look at the opening real quick. So this opening here, yeah, basically this bishop b7 move lost a pawn, right? So I'm pretty happy with this a4 move. I think it bothers black a little bit here. Probably they play d6 to defend d5. And then I don't know. Then I don't know. Probably I play knight c3 because it bothers the pawn again. Maybe I trade first. So the rook's open. Because if you go knight c3 right away, maybe b4, and then your rook doesn't get out. So maybe a b5 keeps a little pressure here. Then knight c3, b4 probably. And then transfer this knight maybe to e2 and g3. Maybe that's kind of a way to go. Although there may also be knight d5. I mean, that should be looked at because you might have some tactics over here if black trades, right? If the knight comes here, you know, play like knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. So maybe knight d5, and maybe black can't even take it. But even if black doesn't take it, white might have the idea of trading and playing bishop d5. And if black really can't take it, white also has the idea of bishop g5. Uh-oh, wait, this is really tough for black here. Really tough, right? Because if black just plays some move defending stuff, I mean, black can't take here just yet without losing an exchange, right? And if they play some defensive move, then this bishop's going to dodge away from the trade and go to g5 now. And that's why Steve Nash was already pre-defending like the knight on c6 and covering a8. Interesting. So Cartier's saying, maybe in response to bishop e3, well, so Steve Nash is saying maybe we should just trade right away. Cartier's saying maybe just play d6 right away. It's another move which we haven't talked about so much. It defends e5. White can give black these doubled pawns, but at least they clamp this knight d4 kind of move. Then we play c3 for white to stop knight d4. It's a game, just another game. We'll have to investigate it, right? We will have to investigate it. Hey, Noah, welcome to chat. You'll know the answer to your own question if you stick around for 2 minutes or so, maybe less. All right. So interesting stuff to investigate there. Bishop c5. I would love to try this out. I would love to. Also, as white in this position, you don't have to trade right away, right? Because you could play a move like a4 is one more poking move where you haven't yet decided for the knight, and you wait to see if your opponent takes or what they do about b5. And that could inform your choice about whether or not you want to trade on c5 if they just leave it, right? So like if bishop b7, maybe that tells you like now I do want to trade, or maybe it tells you now I don't want to trade. So that info might help us out there. All right, let's play Max. I almost played c5. Very hard just to even play the right opening. I'm very shaky today. Sorry, folks, if the camera's a mess. All right, let's see what Max has in store for us. We can pre-move knight takes e5 here, Jesse. We don't know if white's going to take on e5 or not, but we just pre-move knight takes e5. If white does take on e5, we recapture it immediately, right? If white plays some other move, the chess.com server will say knight takes e5 is illegal. It'll put the knight back on c6, then we play whatever move we want in that position. And it'll happen pretty fast. All right, rook e1, our first time seeing that move. Here I should be able to just castle if I want to and wait to see what white does. I think knight e5 won't be particularly dangerous here with the rook e1 move in. It's a 5-minute game. I'm not going to spend 10 minutes calculating it. But I don't think that any of these moves are helping that. All right, that move means my bishop should definitely go to the long diagonal. I mean, not definitely, but, you know, it's a blitz game. That's enough information for me to put my bishop over here. And on c3, I get to do what Saints has been wanting. I get to play some version here of a martial attack. And I think this should be a perfectly good version. Early h3 for white's not going to help white much in the martial. The bishop's on c5 instead of e7, which might be slightly worse for me, but the bishop's good on b7 and h3 is not a very great move. So this should all be fine here. We'll see how it pans out in practice. If knight e5, probably have to trade the knight and play knight f4. No, then my bishop on c5 is hanging to the rook. If knight e5, maybe play knight f4 without even trading. And then, think. All right, I believe in this move. I'm going to try it out. It's a long calculation with d4, but we're just going to try it. Knight takes, rook takes, bishop f2 check. Oh, I missed that, buddy. So right here, buddy's saying we should just trade, rook takes, and then bishop f2. If king f2, queen f6, and the rook can't be saved. So that would refute this opening by white. All right, anyway, here we are now. Here we are, born to be kings. I want to play rook e8, but bishop f7 check feels refutational. Play queen e7, but the knight just goes to f3. So I think the most logical move is to just get the queen near the opponent's king, right? This variation is a sacrifice by black, right? I have sacrificed 2 pieces for a rook. My compensation is mainly the white king being weak. Not too much else. Maybe like a drop of development lead, but really almost nothing. There's a lot of cry in me, Aaron the Bruce. There's a lot of cry in me. It comes up now and then. Grand Pacer, this marshal is not even in disguise. This is a full-on marshal. And that's why it's important to know like the ideas of things instead of just like, you know, one variation by heart or whatever, right? This is a martial gambit, period, right? I mean, that's just what it is. or martial attack. I don't know if you guys call it a gambit or an attack. It also doesn't matter what you call it, right? It doesn't matter what you call it. Either way, it's the martial. Develop the rook, put some pressure on the knight. Bishop d5 was a very nice looking defensive move. Very, very cool move, right? Because now if knight e5, he has bishop b7, hitting my rook. The bishop stopping knight f3, which would be my winning move there normally. I mean, I can keep the game going with knight e5, bishop b7, rook e8. It's interesting. But it's a very strong defensive move. If queen g2, he can take the piece on c6. So anyway, I brought out the rook. That was the choice. Why rook a over rook f? Because of bishop f7 check and bishop takes rook. That's why I didn't move my rook on f8 even here at the very beginning, right? Rook f8, bishop f7. And it's still the reason why this rook's sitting on f8. And the whole reason I played queen h4 was to bring this one out instead. Now I feel like I can just trade queens and win the piece here, right? And just win the endgame. I guess Max kind of gave up on his position. Right? He just got old and tired and was like, I give up, whatever. Whatever, man. Do I look like I care? Do I look like I care, David? That's my Max impression. Is it better to double rooks or to play f5? It's either f5 or rook e8. Can't be wrong to bring out another piece, honestly, right? As Danny would say, if bringing out this rook to the open file is wrong, he doesn't want to be right. But actually, I do want to be right. I mean, I want to really discover chess, even if it's paradoxical at times. But this move's probably right. Now I play f5 anyway, right? And the rooks come in. I don't know how hard I should think about this. The rooks come in. Huh. Now on rook e2, maybe stuff gets attacked, so I should play knight e5 here. That I do care about. Rook here, bishop d3 is what annoys me about rook e2. Yeah, I agree with myself. I agree with myself. I'll bring in the knight. Good move. This is definitely the most annoying move he could play here. I'll just limit his knight and bishop. And then play h5, h4 to bother that knight some more. He stopped me for a moment. But white can't move the two queenside pieces, so there's not really anything to do. All right, looking at this opening. You know, h3 this early, to me, doesn't make the most sense against black's setup. I mean, I guess it makes sense with d4, that he's stopping bishop g4. Actually, h3 does make sense to really control this d4 break. But my first guess is that this is like a super improved Marshall, and I think that Buddy's variation proves that it was. Buddy said in this position you take, takes, and then play check. Now, how this position here could be okay for white, I can't imagine, right? Once we notice this move. If takes, then queen f6, and black's up a rook against a piece, aka an exchange. And if the king moves somewhere like this, right? I mean, I don't know what white's playing for there either, right? Knight f4 threatens bishop g2, queen h4. I mean, white's just down in development and materials equal, and black has no problems. So, did I walk into bishop h6 grand pacer? Maybe I did in the actual game. Hang on, that's an interesting question. I actually put my king on this square here, yeah, and allowed this. That's hilarious. The game ended with me blundering my extra exchange and letting both those pieces out. However, I would still have 3 extra connected passed pawns and win the game, proving that Max should have resigned 10 moves ago if even me hanging a rook is completely winning for black in their sleep. Then there's no scenario for white possible. If I hang a rook to his undeveloped pieces and can still win. All right, so back to the opening, which is a more interesting question. So I think here, Buddy's move knight e5. White would have to try d4, right? That would have to be white's move. That's actually interesting, right? That's not the end of the world yet for white. Unless black's got something clever here, which they might. Which they well might have. Am I in trouble? I don't know yet, Yang. Anything's possible here. One idea I'm looking at is this, going for like a weak square and attacking this. But it does allow a queen trade, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm giving white the bishop pair and an extra pawn in the endgame. So there's some cause for concern. But this square is nigh indefensible. Let's trade off an undeveloped piece, and let's try and defend it. Now let's win back black's pawn with knight d3. And I think the rook should perhaps, well, I guess white can't allow knight b2 because then those double isolated pawns remain weak. So the move here has to be rook e2 defending that. On knight c1, rook back e1 defending the first rank. Looks like an equal-ish position. I don't know what you all think, but looks equal-ish. So maybe nobody's in trouble here. Black's got, pretty active pieces for one doubled pawn. So I guess the danger of black being like in trouble in this position is pretty low. Yeah, I know metabolic. White didn't have to, but it seemed like the best option to me. Was d5 sound? Probably. Okay, Grand Pacer saying maybe instead of taking this pawn, just go for the e-file here, right? So that's a nice move. That might actually give black a little bit of an edge. Let's see here. And then you're coming here, right? This looks very nice for black. I have trouble believing that white doesn't have the advantage. Very nice idea, Grand Pacer. Counter sack on f7. Oh, yeah. Very good, Baguette. So as white, we don't want to concede stuff, right? So we try maybe this move here. Black's still going to be better, though. I mean, it's a good idea. It's a good idea, but black's still going to be better here. I mean, something as simple as this. And black's pawn structure is better. But that's a much better defense, king f1. Much better. Not as clear. Why would black trade queens when white's undeveloped, though? I don't know if that's exactly your question, Metabolic Error. I don't really want to trade queens. It was just the smoothest way to develop from here, to keep going forward. I felt like I needed to go forward. I didn't see any move other than knight f4 that I wanted to play here. So, why would white trade when undeveloped? You mean white's not going to trade queens? I guess because that keeps me from playing queen g5, killing white, was my thought. Why I would try and trade as white here. In any case, g2 is attacked, right? And probably the only way to defend that square is f3. And then as white, I don't want black's queen getting in on this stuff. So I traded her, thus probably saving white from getting super wrecked. I think I walked a very narrow path to like staying in the game here for white. I think I walked a narrow path to not just outright losing. You want to play bishop e3 instead of trading the bishop. And then after knight g2, after f3. Okay, but then, yeah, you have to play f3 first. Now it's my turn. You're never going to play bishop e3, by the way. Do you see? So, black's got two really good options here. Metabolic, right? One is black takes the second open file and tries to play rook e2. Right? Other is we take here, rook takes. Now black's got control over knight d2. It gives up our option of taking back this pawn with the knight, but notice we have a second knight that can come into f4 whenever we want to, and then hop into some of these same weak squares. And the idea here is we take both files and try and come down again and slow white's development of these pieces. So realistically, what's the evaluation here? It's tough, right? It's tough for white. So if the variation that I played for white managed to sort of get a position that was maybe defensible, where white could maybe draw, then we should be satisfied with that. We should be happy for white with the position I got white. Because like at no point is white playing for like a good position here, right? And black also, in addition to rook e8, might throw in knight f4 with this knight e2 tempo. See what white does about that. Maybe rook e1, knight d3, rook e2 could transpose those lines I had before. Or maybe black can do even better somehow. I don't know. King f2, there's knight d3. Anyway, that's all very, very interesting. So Buddy was saying that this knight e5 move here might refute white. And certainly after rook e5, bishop f2, white would be refuted. But I think after the move d4, it's actually still complicated. And I don't know exactly what I would want to do here as black in this position. There's bishop b6, bishop d4, knight g6, knight d7. There's like 6 different candidate moves here. It's very, very confusing to me. So a lot to investigate further, right? A lot to investigate further. What I played in the game, knight f4 here, taking on g2 was also very, very controversial, complicated, right? After bishop d5, rook e8, I think black's okay. Another option from white is just to trade off this piece. And then white wants to see about defending this. This is definitely speculative from black in the sense that I had not looked ahead to any position that I, knew I could get, wanted to get, liked here. It was really like a risk. I was expecting queen f1 in this position to keep this queen out. I didn't look at queen e4 here. It's an interesting move. I imagine white could just play f3 and a queen trade is not too bad for white. Although, not losing for black either. Just the game remains interesting and hard to evaluate. The only issue I see with queen g5 is bishop takes queen. Most natural would be to develop one of these rooks to one of these squares, right? Rather than pressing the issue with your queen that's already on a good square. But, there could also be a move like queen h5, attacking this pawn and looking at queen here or queen here. There's a host of possible moves here. Very hard to say. White is quite undeveloped. Black definitely has their chances, right? But who knows? Okay, Max wants to look at this idea of sacking on f7. So let's have a look at that too. Okay, guys? I'm just saying, I didn't really, have a follow-up in mind here. I didn't really know what would happen. It's just something that one could investigate. So, Max is saying that when I go knight takes g2, maybe he could go to f7, right? Is that right? Yeah, knight takes f7. Okay, that's the idea. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be monstrously complicated as well, Max. Very, very hard to say. A likely move from black is queen h4 rather than taking, to give a sense of how weird this is about to get. I have no idea what would happen, Max. You could try it. It looks fun. It looks fun. I have no idea what's happening. Ditto with your question about king takes g2, I don't really know. I would play this, I guess, probably, checking the king, and then when the king moves, probably play knight f3, attacking the rook. Maybe get a position kind of like in the game, right? This one, maybe I've got a little better idea about than the knight f7, which is so crazy. This one here, king's checked. F3, bishop f3 looks like a refutation. So the king's coming to f1 maybe. And now one option was knight f3, but maybe here it would be queen h4 again, like I was saying in the knight f7 line, right? Well, you can get one of these, but queen h3 looks winning here with bishop f3 if the king comes out. Yeah, not sure what white does here next. Rook e3? Rook e3 maybe? As you can see, it's messy and I have no idea. Rook d8. I'm just trying out some moves. Oh, you can also just play a move like bishop b6 in this kind of position, because if white takes, then you take here, right? And then you take here and here. Basically, what black's going for is bishop f3. Queen has to move somewhere where they can't go to d2 because the king needs that square. And then you try and cut the king off and go for checkmate. Maybe there's some way around this for the white queen. Maybe there's some genius maneuver for her to stop these checkmates, or be able to block the d file with the bishop. But certainly it looks very interesting from the black perspective. I was playing this game from black side, and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty interested in my position here. So also, yeah, so knight f7, also queen h4 looks pretty exciting. This knight can't capture anything super valuable right here. Obviously, it's giving white some good tactical resources. The knight could go trade for some piece. Maybe you could take this bishop. Ooh, actually, that's it. That's a valuable thing we could go take. Maybe that. Maybe that. Oh, except black's also threatening this, everybody. Black can win without the bishop on b7 in summary. We weren't sure. When I thought of knight d6 to b7, I thought maybe if we take away that bishop on b7, black will be out of resources for their attack. I mean, that was certainly a big part of the game. But here, you guys will see knight takes rook, threatening checkmate, and this rook's coming in as well as needed. And you can see that black has enough other pieces here. So let's not take the bishop on b7. Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what to do. Bishop g5 would almost be like a genius move if after queen takes h3, you could then also play knight g5 check and take the queen, right? So you could say queen h4, you're not even threatening this pawn. I have knight g5. Good call. So what do we do for white here? Maybe just try and trade off the queen. Takes here, takes. Now maybe this knight has to move. Black's up a full rook at the moment. Black's got a lot of things hanging, but Tal would say you can only take them one at a time, right? So if white takes this bishop, black will take the knight with the rook, right? And just collect all white's pieces. If you move the knight away with check first, king here, then on knight e6, the bishop will save. On knight f7, you sack the rook and save the bishop. Yeah, knight h6 here, same thing. If you do this, black just happily takes it. Here, saves this piece, and black has an extra knight still. Oh, and black has knight c2. The knight on e1, far from being trapped, is itself a trapper. With queen still on the board. With queen still on the board, yeah, you don't want to waste this tactical energy from white's perspective just to trade a minor piece for a rook. That knight was one of white's pieces. Black can always bring a new rook and just outnumber white like crazy, right? And now black's choosing between knight takes rook and queen takes pawn, and maybe just rook f8, developing the rook. Oh, I guess rook e8 would sort of save white, right? If rook e8 would save white, then we'd better take white's rook. I don't believe this position here for white right now. I generally don't believe in that knight h6, f7 kind of thing. We just tried that Sinestra. It went really badly. We've tried knight d6, here, here, here. Max is now checking moves with the engine to suggest them in chat. No thanks, Max. That takes all the fun out of it. Rook e4? Oh my god! Queen e4, knight g5, or knight here, and if queen h3, knight g5 as well. Yeah, come on, Max. You just took all the fun out of it. You just took all the fun out of it. Don't you know what channel we're on? Lame. Lame. I mean, I'm sure there's refutations on every move for white and black on what we were doing. You thought we're done. Okay, we're done. Rook e4, white was winning the whole time. Who knows? All right, so that was pretty exciting, that game as well, right? That sort of delayed Marshall gambit coming out of black certainly looked interesting. Perhaps in this position, I should prefer knight e5 over the knight f4 I played, but both of them are pretty hard to evaluate. All right, I bet there's somebody else who wants to try out this opening, right? Let's just practice it up. Ooh, I could play the Clark opening against Clark. So this, Clark says, is the first line that anyone has ever named after him. I called the idea of d3, bishop e3, the Clark variation, because that's what he suggested to us in chat. Clark, you're supposed to play a6 before knight f6 to get the position we're going for, but I'll castle. We'll call it the Nordovik. So But now he'll have the chance of having his own opening played against him for the first time. That should be fun. We'll give Nordovik the old Nordovik. And this is the Nordovik, folks. D3, bishop E3. So simple. So simple, just bringing out the pieces, countering the diagonal, and seeing if black wants to give white the F file or the tempo with a retreat. And white's development gets slightly ahead of black's if black retreats. And if black trades, it's also helping white's development with the rook on F1. Maybe Nordovik will try D6, the anti-Nordovik. Who suggested D6? Was that you, Max? Or was it Sombrero? Metabolic error? D6 here just solves? You mean like after D6, there's nothing left to play metabolic error? We know everything about the position? Same move as Steve Nash, bishop A7. So I'm going to play like opening theory, folks. A4 as discovered by all of us like half an hour ago. Now, Steve Nash played bishop B7, and then I traded, and won a pawn. Why is Clark repeating this? Why is he repeating this? Has he been preparing this with the computer while we were playing the game against Max? Look at this one, Jesse. See, he didn't take on B5, and it just put my rook back on A1, so I didn't lose anything. And now I can go and play a move that I would play if he moved the knight. Good night, sweet prince. F7 is hanging. Yeah, Flachspieler, that's good. Right here, F takes E3 would be a good pre-move. A4 seems to be good in most positions, 11 Gen, yeah. Oh, Nordovik had walked away and didn't see the previous game with Steve Nash. I was about to ask if Nordovik, what you learned from Seth is not to resign. But no, you didn't learn it from him. You did resign. If you were going to keep playing here after knight takes C8, I was going to be like, I see what you've been learning from training with Seth. All right, Prolux. Not much to say about that opening since it lost the same pawn as the other one, right? Black shouldn't play bishop b7 in that position. They need to defend the e5 pawn. The Nordovik is looking like a pretty good line for white against the neo-modern Arkhangelsk. Just in case this guy doesn't know what the opening of the week is. He knows. He knows what it is. I should have never doubted a pro-Lux player. Oh. Something new. He's playing the early Nordovik, right? So the threat here is to take and then take the e5 pawn, folks. As soon as e4 is solidly defended as black, you have to realize your e5 is under threat. I'm probably going to play b5, like in the neo-modern Arkhangelsk. Yeah, because I just want to get some more practice with the bishop out on c5. We'll see what it leads to. And everybody wants to see what happens with the d6. So we're going to try the d6. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's one logical move. Nordovik didn't want to reveal how to beat the Nordovik, so just took it easy. Let the Nordovik line score another win. The Nordovik line is now 2-0 in the entire database, I think. I know you did metabolic. You're not the only one. A few people were calling for that move. So now we're going to try it. See what it does. Now, where do I want this bishop? White's pawn structure doesn't give this bishop any good places. It's a big positional question where it should be. And I could just randomly castle here because it's blitz. If I were playing actual chess, I would think about where this bishop should be. G4 is bad. E6 is bad. The best square for it seems to be C8, which means I need to play rook D8, which means maybe queen E7. No, I'm solving my problem mentally, Dritman, instead of like kicking it down the road. I have to know what my plan is, because it's going to inform what else I do. Queen e7 also defends this pawn, which lets me go in with knight d4. In a lot of positions, knight d4 would lose the pawn on e5, right, if I hadn't played queen e7. Yeah, laughter. There's no good answer for it. There's no good answer for it. Should I go knight d4 now? Seems basically just good. So I will. So my opponent's really committed to a king-sided pawn storm here. I'm going to use c4 as a lever to diffuse that. F takes e and knight f3 was another important idea for white, yeah. And the position metabolic error is talking about is right here. Whoops. Oh, white played a4, so it's my move, sorry. Let's keep going then. If I go rook c8 takes this, is that annoying? Yeah, it could be. So I'm playing for c4, like I said. So the idea was right here, white could trade on e5 and then against queen e5 play knight f3 and fight the d4 pawn right away. After pawn takes e5, I was also considering playing knight to d7 as well as queen e5. I had two different moves I might play. All right, so now the question is, do I want the open file or do I want the bishop here to have this? I think I might need the rook to play c4 even more than I need that open file. The open file doesn't seem to do too much just yet. This knight's going to be amazing on e3. I think probably white shouldn't have allowed that move, and from the time usage, white didn't plan to allow it. And now we can just push white off the board with this knight and pawn duo. Yeah, in this position, rook takes or bishop takes is a tough question, Flachspieler. Either one is possible. I wouldn't say for sure one was right and one was wrong. Yeah. All right, so looking at the opening and figuring out if this opening was good or bad for white. I would advocate poking with a4 earlier in this position here, right? To me, the moment black takes, it makes sense to play a4 because in some case you might want your knight on c3 to attack this pawn. If I play b4, then you can play knight d2 just like in the game if you're pro Lux, and the knight's got obviously a great square. The bishop's got some options too. That would be like knight d2 in the game. But in the game, you know, if my opponent played a4, I was planning not to play b4 because the knight would be so well placed. I was planning to just play bishop b7. And even that, you know, white could consider just doing this early on in the opening, just so I don't put a rook on a8. But I don't think this would like refute black in any way. It's probably still a close to equal position. Although maybe white's a little bit better. If I had to choose, I would choose to play white here for sure if I was just given a choice. So I don't know how perfectly d6 answers this whole thing. I mean, even when everything goes okay for black, I feel like I haven't lost the game, but I would still prefer to be white. And I think an early a4 is even more promising from white's perspective. Right now, if I go bishop b7 on this, now as white, I would strongly consider knight c3 attacking b5. Now knight d5 or knight e2 to g3. Both look perfectly good for white. You know, I mean, you just come in here. If the knight takes, you come here, and this is slightly awkward to me. I know there's ways to untangle it with like knight a5, but the knight's not good on a5, and you have to defend e7 first, probably. And the knight's not going to be amazing on b7 either. So you're making it hard for black to play knight d4, which is the only setup they really want. I still really like this position here for white. So I think the Nordovik can still get a pretty good position against this d6, dc5. But I'm only starting. I've never really played much of this structure before. I'm only starting to like get into it through these couple games that you guys have just seen here in the last hour. All right. So, do you guys think I've learned enough to face Cartier yet? We'll find out. We'll find out. Should I give him the Nordovik, or should I play something we haven't seen yet? If I play something we haven't seen yet, I'll have no info about it yet. If I play the Nordovik, at least I have an idea. Because I've played like 3 games with the Nordovik now. 2 as white, 1 as black. All right, we're going to try the Nordovik. We're going to try the Nordovik again. The Evans Gambit's not our opening of the week, thank Palumbo. This is the opening of the week that we're learning. This B5, Bishop C5 defense to the Ruy Lopez. Oh, he played D6 right away there. Wait, what am I confused about? D3. Oh, other people castled here, and then Bishop E3, D6. Okay, so we've got the same position. All right, so I said that in this position, I would try trading or A4. Let's play A4 first. Let's not tell Sombrero if I'm going to trade on C5 yet or not. I probably am. Okay, he goes with Rook B8. He goes with Rook B8. So I get the A file. Okay, no question. I want the A file. Well, let's not think about it too much. Let's have it. All right. Then what do we do? Have a party about the A file? No, we need to keep developing. So what's the plan here? Could play C3, D4. I could play knight C3 and transfer the knight. What's he going to play next? You just move on. I need to develop the knight. Let's go. Just plain old development for me. Vanilla to C vanilla. Oh, now he wants to get knight d4 on me. Now he wants to play knight d4. I don't really see how I stop that. So I allow that. If you can't stop it, allow it. Actually, I'm going to play something more complicated. He'll appreciate that. I should probably play h3 there. Probably. This will be interesting. There's light coming in from the window. I don't have a shade right now. Just a bunch of holes where I tried to attach some new blinds or something. And it's also bouncing off my desk, so it's hitting me from everywhere. Yeah, I am. All right, look at this mess. Look at this mess. Feast your eyes on this incomprehensible situation. I'm really struggling to look at this. Okay, I have to recapture. All right. Going for it. Is this still theory? No, we're just trying something. Just trying out some moves, learning something. Bishop f1 almost certainly loses by force because white is threatening bishop f6, pawn takes f6, queen h6. He's not going to grab the rook. Cartier prefers sacking rooks to taking rooks. There's no way he'll take it. But he also doesn't like playing defensive moves, and this position seems to call for a defensive move. I might do that at some point after CS. It depends. Knight f6, pawn takes, bishop h4 can be perfectly good, followed by like queen h6. The key is I need to get my queen into h6. That's the key to anything I do. So here you're going to see that taking with the bishop is better than taking with the knight, because that gets my queen here. In some cases, if I take with the knight and then play bishop h4, my opponent could play like king g7 to keep my queen out of h6. Or maybe king h8, queen h6, rook check, rook g6, you know? Depends. All right, so now I'm just going to start bringing my rooks to the g1 square. He took my rook. Good thing I've got two. Ah! He's threatening me. He's threatening me. You guys all saw it, right? He threatened me. Oh my god! I played my moves out of order. Checkmate in one. Good game. That was exciting. All right. I meant to put my king here. That was my plan some moves before. All right. Good game, Sombrero. Very good game. Wow. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, you kept it going with this incredible move earlier on. Where was it? Here, here. What was this choice? In this position, queen here. Yeah, just like letting me take the piece. And then this move. Wow. That really hurt. Terrific. I mean, I suppose, you know, white could play bishop e7 or bishop h4 at this point and be winning. But I didn't choose to. And then after this, it was just barely better for white. Very complicated. This was a nice move too. Very nice move here, this one also. I saw the idea. I just planned king h3 and then didn't play it. Yeah, you were generally busted from the opening there, which means you also played one bad move in addition to all the good moves. Let me see. Okay, so far, this is interesting. You can play this, I can play this. Very, very interesting. This move here is bad, I think. Yeah. That must be the mistake. There's got to be something better than that available. Maybe you could play queen d7 here, Cartier. Huh. Yeah. I didn't see that during the game, but now I see it. That's great. That's a great idea. That's fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of options here. Everybody's suggesting cool ideas in chat. Those are all great ideas. This one here looks pretty good in this position. The point is if knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes here, and then the black queen is coming to g4 or h3, right? Yeah, it's to get to h3 as soon as possible after CS. You're not lost. You're on top of it. And if white takes with the bishop here, again, you can't let the knight f6 check win your queen, right? So now you ignore the bishop whenever it's there and you take here. And there's an important pattern here. So first of all, if pawn takes bishop, queen h3, and white is donezo, right? Knight f3 is just coming. Now maybe Cartier would find some amazing move to keep the game going, because I thought he was done in the game. But looks more or less finished. And then the second part of the idea is that if white responds with the same queen d2 move, this is a pattern I learned long ago. Black has the winning continuation. Knight check, king here, bishop check, king here, queen check, king here, checkmate. So it's really a race for the queens to get in. It's really like a big race for whose queen can get to the opponent's, like, for black it's the light squares, and for white it's the dark squares. Whose queen can get into those squares first? Really big deal. So white would probably just be lost in this position, seems to me. So if you had played queen d7 here, what are like the defensive options for white in such a situation? Well, there's a few. there's actually several different defensive options for white. But I think that we can say that black's actually the one who's one tempo faster getting the queen in. And this probably refutes the line that I played with knight c3, knight d5. I would think that this position should be okay for black, even though white has some defenses here. So one idea to consider is sacking the queen. That's always an option. You can play like this as white. You get 2 minor pieces against the queen, which is not terrible. It's generally has some potential of being playable, but I think here it's probably not good enough. I mean, it's going to be better for black. That's one escape valve white has. Yeah, so another defensive option is to move the king over. And there, in general, the idea is that you're just bringing a rook over to cover the checkmate. Even if black gets knight here, white should be fine. Something like check. If pawn takes, bishop takes, black's checkmated. So king here, and then you just have to cover g2. And the game goes on. Right? And the game goes on. And then another option, maybe Metabolic Error was just telling us about it. Another option for white in this position is you trade once, and then you bring the bishop here. Now, against this move, you have bishop g3. However, generally speaking, this position is a clear positional advantage for black anyway, because the restricted bishop on g3 is not very strong, right? And black can play king h8, rook g8 first if they want, or they can try f5 here. And generally speaking, the knight is actually now superior to any of the bishops in this game here. So, yeah, this position here should be somewhat favorable for black. Even if we want to emphasize the value of the knight compared to the bishops, you might even play a sneaky move like b4 here, just stopping c3. But if I play f5, white doesn't have time for c3 anyway because of the bishop trap. So f5 is probably impactful enough. But, if we were looking at a move like king h8, c3, and it's like, oh, shoot, wherever we go with the knight, this bishop's just trading for it, as white tries to equalize the position. Then there's actually like a sneaky idea of b4, which stops c3 because of takes, and now the rook's here. All that said, I bet f5 is like the clearest way to play this position for black. This f4 threat is big, and it looks like it forces like a first concession out of white here. So yeah, so this whole line for white, to me, doesn't look like it actually worked out. This was too strong. Very enjoyable. I hope you guys all enjoyed it too. And this opening should be a very fresh one to look at over the course of the week. Till then, ta-ta.